Jake Morrison stood at the large window of the space station and watched the alien ships leave Earth forever. The massive vessels moved slowly away from the blue planet below, and their silver hulls caught the light from the sun. Each ship was 3 times bigger than anything humans had ever built, and they moved with a grace that made human technology look clumsy and primitive. Jake pressed his hand against the cold glass and felt his heart sink as the last hope for humanity disappeared into the darkness of space. The Galactic Federation had arrived on Earth 50 years ago with promises of knowledge and friendship. They brought medicine that could cure any disease and technology that seemed like magic to human eyes. The aliens came from 12 different worlds, and each species looked completely different from the others. There were the tall blue Zephyrians, with their long flowing robes, and the small green Valdris who spoke in musical tones. The rock-like granite people never seemed to move fast, and the energy beings called Flux could change their shape at will. For decades, humans had worked hard to prove they belonged in the galactic community. Earth sent its best scientists and diplomats to learn from the advanced civilizations. Captain Lisa Rodriguez had spent 20 years studying alien technology, and she could speak 7 different alien languages. Dr. Alan Cooper had written hundreds of papers about alien biology and culture. President Martha Wells had signed trade agreements and peace treaties with every Federation member. But it was never enough for the aliens. They watched humans with careful eyes and took notes about everything Earth did. When humans fought wars on Mars over mining rights, the aliens shook their heads in disappointment. When Earth struggled with poverty and crime, the Federation members whispered among themselves about human nature. Every mistake humanity made was recorded and judged by creatures who claimed to have moved beyond such problems thousands of years ago. The final decision came after the incident on Europa. Human colonists had discovered valuable crystals under the ice, and 2 companies had started fighting over the mining rights. The conflict lasted 6 months and resulted in the deaths of 300 people before Earth government forces could stop it. The Federation Council met for 3 days and then delivered their verdict through Ambassador Kretak of the Zephyrian Empire. Jake remembered that day clearly because he had been in the meeting room when the tall blue alien spoke the words that changed everything. The human species has demonstrated a fundamental inability to resolve conflicts without violence, Kretak had said in his cold, mechanical voice. Your people lack the emotional maturity required for membership in galactic civilization, and your aggressive nature poses a threat to peaceful worlds throughout the galaxy. Lisa Rodriguez had stood up from her chair and tried to argue. Please, give us more time, she had begged. We are still learning and growing as a species, and every year we become more peaceful and wise. But the alien had simply shaken his head and walked away from the table. The Federation gave humanity 30 days to prepare for their departure. They took back all the advanced technology they had shared over the decades, including the medical equipment and the faster-than-light communication systems. The only things they left behind were basic star maps showing nearby solar systems and simple faster-than-light engines that could barely reach the closest stars. It was like giving a child a wooden stick and telling them to build a house. Dr. Cooper had tried to convince some of the alien scientists to stay, but they all refused. It would be against Federation law, they explained. No member species is allowed to help a civilization that has been deemed unfit for galactic society. The aliens packed their belongings and deleted all the research data they had collected about human technology and culture. President Wells called an emergency meeting of world leaders as the Federation ships prepared to leave. The leaders argued and shouted at each other for hours, but they could not find a solution. Some wanted to attack the alien ships and steal their technology, but others knew that would only prove the Federation was right about human violence. In the end, they could only watch helplessly as their dreams of joining the galactic community disappeared. Jake watched the last Federation ship activate its faster-than-light drive and vanish in a flash of blue light. The space around Earth was suddenly empty and quiet after 50 years of constant alien traffic. Below him, the planet looked small and alone in the vast darkness of space. Humanity had been judged and found wanting by creatures who claimed to know better, but Jake Morrison was not ready to give up hope. He turned away from the window and walked to the communications center where Lisa Rodriguez was already working on new plans. "They think we are too primitive and violent," she said without looking up from her computer. "Let us prove them wrong by becoming something they never expected." Martha Wells appeared on the communication screen with determination in her eyes. "The Federation has made a mistake," she announced to the world. "They have underestimated the human spirit, and they will regret leaving us behind. 200 years had passed since the Federation abandoned Earth, and humanity had learned to survive alone in the cold darkness of space." Captain Roy Davis stood on the bridge of the colony ship New Dawn as it entered orbit around the planet. Humans had named Hope. The world was the 15th colony established by Earth, and it represented everything humanity had accomplished without alien help or guidance. The early years after the Federation departure had been brutal and filled with failure. The first colony ships built with leftover alien technology had broken down in deep space, and thousands of people had died in the darkness between stars. Earth engineers had worked day and night to understand the basic faster-than-light drives. The aliens had left behind, but the technology was far beyond human knowledge. Many expeditions had been lost completely, and their fate remained unknown to this day. Roy remembered hearing stories about the disaster at Kepler Station, where a faulty life support system had killed an entire colony of 5,000 people. The rescue ships had arrived 3 months too late and found only frozen bodies floating in space. Captain Helen Brooks had been one of the few survivors because she had been away on a supply run when the station failed. She never spoke about what she saw when she returned, but people said her hair had turned white from the shock. Despite the terrible losses, humanity had refused to give up on reaching the stars. Engineer Sophie Martinez had spent her entire career studying the abandoned Federation blueprints and slowly learning how their technology worked. She had made breakthrough after breakthrough by combining alien designs with human engineering principles. Her new fusion drives were twice as powerful as anything the Federation had left behind, and they could reach nearby star systems in just 5 years, instead of 20. Dr. Nancy Blake had led the archaeological team that discovered the ruins on Kepler 7. The dead civilization had built magnificent cities of crystal and metal, but they had been gone for thousands of years. Nancy and her team had spent months exploring the empty buildings and trying to understand what had happened to their builders. The answer had come from a partially damaged computer system that still held records of the ancient people. The builders had been called the Architects, and they had once been members of the Galactic Federation. But 3,000 years ago, the Federation had decided the Architects were too focused on art and beauty to be useful members of galactic society. The aliens had been abandoned, just like humanity, and left to survive on their own. The Architects had thrived for centuries after the Federation departure, but eventually their civilization had collapsed from unknown causes. Nancy had shown the records to Captain Pete Johnson, who was leading the exploration mission. "They were like us," she had explained, while pointing at the ancient text on her computer screen. "The Federation decided they were not good enough and threw them away like garbage." Pete had ordered his team to search every building and collect any technology that might be useful to humanity. The Architect ruins had provided humanity with advances in energy storage and material science that helped them build better colonies. But more importantly, the discovery had proven that the Federation was not as wise and perfect as they claimed to be. They had abandoned other species before, and those species had built amazing things after being left alone. By the year 2400, humanity had established colonies on 43 different worlds, and each one was a testament to human determination and creativity. New Haven, around Proxima Centauri, had become a center for research and learning. New Texas was famous for its vast farms that fed millions of people across human space. New California had the largest shipyards outside the solar system, and they built vessels that were faster and stronger than anything humans had dreamed of 2 centuries earlier. The colonies were not perfect, and many had faced terrible disasters over the years. New Boston had been hit by a massive solar flare that destroyed most of their electronics and killed hundreds of people. New Moscow had suffered through a plague that lasted 3 years before doctors found a cure. New Sydney had been attacked by hostile alien creatures that lived deep underground, and the colonists had fought a brutal war to survive. But humanity had learned from every failure and grown stronger with each challenge. Commander Lisa Santos had developed new ways to protect colonies from radiation storms. Dr. Carl Peterson had created medical techniques that could treat diseases no human had ever seen before. General Frank Miller had trained colonial defense forces that could fight anything the galaxy threw at them. The children born on the colony worlds were different from their parents who had grown up on Earth. They had never seen blue skies or breathed natural air, but they were tougher and more adaptable than any previous generation of humans. These colonial kids could work in zero gravity as easily as walking, and they understood technology that seemed impossible to older people. Roy Davis had been born on New Haven, and he had never set foot on Earth until he joined the colonial fleet. He could not understand why anyone would want to live on a crowded planet when there were empty worlds waiting to be explored. His generation did not fear the darkness of space because they had been born in it and raised by it. The Federation had expected humanity to disappear quietly after being abandoned, but instead humans had spread across dozens of star systems and built a civilization that rivaled anything in the galaxy. They had done it without help from any alien species and without the advanced technology that other civilizations took for granted. Every human colony was proof that the Federation had been wrong about human potential and determination. Captain Ben Taylor was checking the sensor readings on his exploration ship Eagle's Wing when the distress signal appeared on his screens. The message was coming from a damaged vessel drifting near the edge of the Ross system, and it was broadcasting in a language no human had ever heard before. Ben ordered his crew to approach carefully because they had no idea what kind of aliens they were about to encounter. The alien ship was unlike anything in human records, and it looked more like a living creature than a machine. The hull was covered in what appeared to be scales, and organic tubes ran along its surface like blood vessels. Large sections of the ship had been badly damaged, and atmosphere was leaking from multiple holes. Ben could see movement through the transparent sections, but the creatures inside looked nothing like the Federation species humans remembered. Commander Amy Foster was the first human to make contact with the beings inside the damaged vessel. She put on her environmental suit and crossed through the airlock to find herself face-to-face with insectoid aliens who stood nearly 8 feet tall. Their bodies were covered in hard shells that gleamed like metal, and they had 4 arms that ended in delicate manipulator hands. Most disturbing were their large, compound eyes that seemed to see everything at once. The lead alien introduced himself as hive singer Zetharok of the Vorthan people, and he spoke through a translation device that turned his clicking sounds into understandable words. He explained that his people had been traveling for over 50 years after fleeing their homeworld when a terrible plague had killed most of their population. The few survivors had built generation ships and headed for Federation space, hoping to find sanctuary among the advanced civilizations. But the Federation had turned them away at every world they approached, and the aliens had been forced to keep, traveling deeper into unexplored space. The Zephyrians had declared the Vorthans genetically inferior and refused to allow them into Federation territory. Other species had been equally unwelcoming, and some had even attacked the refugee ships. Without warning, the Vorthans had been drifting aimlessly for months when their life support systems began to fail. Admiral Kate Sullivan received Ben's report while she was at the naval headquarters on New Earth, and she made a decision that would change human history forever. Instead of following Federation policies and turning away the alien refugees, Kate ordered her ships to escort the Vorthons to human space and provide them with everything they needed to survive. "No species deserves to die alone in space," she announced to her staff. "We know what it feels like to be abandoned." The Vorthon refugees were amazed by human kindness because they had expected to be rejected like everywhere else they had tried. To find help, Dr. Greg Adams was assigned to work with their scientists, and he quickly discovered that the insectoid aliens had incredible knowledge of biological sciences and genetic engineering. Their living ships could repair themselves when damaged, and their medical technology could regrow lost limbs in just a few days. In exchange for sanctuary on the colony world New Texas, the Vorthans shared their biotechnology with human researchers, and the results were remarkable. Human scientists learned how to grow buildings instead of constructing them, and how to create organic computers that were faster than any mechanical system. The fusion of human engineering and Vorthon biology produced technologies that neither species could have developed alone. Within months of the first contact, other alien refugees began arriving in human space after hearing about the sanctuary offered to the Vorthans. The crystalline Nexari came next in ships that looked like flying jewels, and they explained that the Federation had exiled them for having thought patterns that were too different from standard galactic norms. The Nexari could process information in ways that seemed impossible to other species, and they thought in mathematical concepts instead of words. Captain Julia Foster was put in charge of establishing the first multi-species colony on a world they named Harmony Prime, and the project faced enormous challenges from the beginning. Humans needed oxygen to breathe, while Vorthons preferred nitrogen, and the Nexari absorbed energy directly from radiation sources. The colonists had to design habitats that could support 3 completely different forms of life in the same settlement. The crystalline aliens brought knowledge of quantum computing and energy manipulation that revolutionized human technology, while learning about human concepts of art and creativity that fascinated their mathematical minds. Dr. Linda Parker spent years developing communication protocols that allowed the 3 species to work together effectively, despite their vastly different ways of thinking and perceiving reality. The aquatic hydros arrived 2 years later in massive water-filled spheres that served as their spacecraft, and they had been rejected by the Federation for having primitive social structures that did not fit galactic standards. The fish-like aliens had abilities that seemed like magic to other species, including limited control over time flow and the capacity to predict probable future events with startling accuracy. Commander Nick Anderson established underwater cities for the hydros in the oceans of several human worlds, and the aquatic aliens shared their temporal manipulation techniques with human scientists. The combination of hydros' time manipulation technology with human engineering created defense systems that could detect attacks before they happened and manufacturing processes that could speed up production by manipulating local time fields. Each new species that joined the human alliance brought unique knowledge and perspectives that enhanced the growing civilization in unexpected ways. The energy beings called Flux had been deemed too unstable for Federation membership, but they taught humans how to work with pure energy and plasma in ways that transformed space travel and weapons technology. The rock-like granite people had been considered too slow and inflexible, but their geological knowledge helped human miners find valuable resources on dozens of worlds. By the year 2450, the human alliance included 8 different species working together on over 60 worlds, and their combined knowledge had created a technological renaissance that surpassed anything the Federation had achieved. The species that had been deemed unworthy by galactic civilization had proven that cooperation and mutual respect were more powerful than the arbitrary standards used by the so-called advanced cultures. Captain Tony Clark commanded the first mixed species crew aboard the exploration vessel Unity, and he reported that the cooperation between different aliens was better than anything he had seen among purely human crews. The diversity of perspectives and abilities meant that every problem could be approached from multiple angles and solutions emerged that no single species would have discovered alone. Dr. Ryan Wood stood in his laboratory surrounded by equipment that would have seemed impossible just 50 years earlier, and he watched as his latest experiment successfully manipulated dark matter for the first time in galactic history. The swirling energy contained in the magnetic field generators represented a breakthrough that could revolutionize everything from space travel to planetary defense systems. Ryan had combined theoretical physics from human research with temporal manipulation techniques learned from the Hydros aliens, and the results exceeded his wildest expectations. The technological renaissance that began in the year 2500s had transformed the human alliance into the most advanced civilization in the known galaxy, and every member species had contributed essential knowledge to the collective achievements. Chief Engineer Carl Patterson had spent 15 years working with Nexari crystal matrices to develop quantum computers that could process information faster than entire Federation research centers. His organic crystalline hybrid systems could solve mathematical problems that had stumped galactic scientists for centuries. The breakthrough in biological computing came when Dr. Amy Chen successfully merged human neural interface technology with Vorthon bioengineering to create living starships that could think and adapt to changing conditions. These vessels grew instead of being built, and they could repair battle damage by regenerating destroyed sections like healing wounds. The ships had personalities and preferences just like any crew member, and they formed emotional bonds with their human captains. Captain Helen Brooks commanded the first bioship named Symbiosis, and she reported that working with a living vessel was unlike anything previous generations of spacers had experienced. The ship could anticipate her needs and respond to dangers faster than any mechanical system, while providing a level of comfort and safety that made long space voyages feel like traveling in a mobile home rather than a cramped metal tube. Admiral Frank Miller oversaw the construction of the massive supercarrier Defiance in the orbital shipyards above New Terra, and the vessel represented everything the human alliance had learned about combining different alien technologies. The ship was grown using Vorthon bioengineering techniques, but reinforced with crystalline armor developed by Nexari material scientists. Its weapons systems used Hydros temporal manipulation to fire projectiles that existed slightly ahead in time, and its shields were powered by flux energy beings who lived symbiotically within the ship's hull. The Defiance was over 3 kilometers long and could carry 50 smaller vessels along with 10,000 crew members from 6 different species, and it moved through space with a grace that made Federation dreadnoughts look clumsy and primitive. The supercarrier could travel faster than any known starship, and its weapons could destroy targets that were protected by the strongest shields in the galaxy. Dr. Linda Parker had been appointed as the Alliance's chief technology coordinator, and she spent her days managing research projects that involved dozens of different species working together on problems that no single civilization could solve alone. The quantum resonance drives developed by her team could move ships across the galaxy in days instead of years, and the breakthrough had come from combining human engineering with mathematics provided by crystalline Nexari researchers. The most impressive achievement was the development of planetary defense networks that could protect entire star systems from any conceivable attack, and the technology had emerged from an unlikely collaboration between granite geological specialists and human weapons designers. The rock-like aliens understood planetary structures in ways that allowed them to turn entire worlds into defensive fortresses, while humans provided the engineering knowledge needed to build continent-spanning shield generators. Captain Kelly Brooks led the first test of the new defensive systems, when her task force deliberately attacked the protected colony world of New Harmony, and the results amazed even the scientists who had designed the network. The planetary shields absorbed energy weapon strikes that should have been powerful enough to crack the planet's surface, and the automated defense platforms destroyed incoming missiles before they could get within 1,000,000 kilometers of their Targets. The breakthrough in faster-than-light communication came when physicist Dr. Chris Martinez successfully created quantum entanglement networks that allowed instantaneous communication across unlimited distances, and the discovery had emerged from studying flux energy patterns combined with Nexari mathematical models. The Alliance could now coordinate activities across their entire territory without the delays that had always plagued space-based civilizations. Engineer Sophie Rodriguez designed the first generation of smart weapons that could think for themselves and adapt to enemy countermeasures in real time, and the artificial intelligence systems were based on hybrid technology that combined human computer science with Vorthan biological neural networks. These weapons could learn from each engagement and share their knowledge with other systems across the galaxy through the quantum communication network. The energy manipulation techniques developed by Dr. Paul Johnson allowed Alliance ships to absorb power from stars and channel it directly into their weapons and drive systems, and the technology had been inspired by watching how flux beings fed on radiation. Ships equipped with stellar collectors could fight indefinitely without running out of power, and they could travel at speeds that approached the theoretical limits of physics. By 2543, the Human Alliance had developed technologies that made Federation. Science looked primitive and outdated, and every major breakthrough had required cooperation between multiple species with different ways of understanding the universe. The civilizations that had been rejected as unworthy had created wonders that the supposedly advanced galactic powers could never have imagined. Captain Emma Davis commanded the Deep Space Reconnaissance Vessel Pioneer as it conducted the first intelligence-gathering mission into Federation territory in over 300 years, and what she discovered shocked everyone who read her reports. The Federation had made virtually no technological progress since abandoning humanity, and their ships used the same basic designs they had employed centuries earlier. The aliens had become complacent and stagnant, while the rejected species had been forced to innovate and adapt to survive. The Federation worlds she observed seemed tired and lifeless compared to the dynamic energy of Alliance colonies, and their populations showed none of the creativity and determination that characterized the refugee civilizations. It was as if the act of judging other species as unworthy had somehow drained the Federation of their own capacity for growth and discovery. Emma's final report concluded that the Alliance now possessed technological capabilities that exceeded anything in Federation space, and the balance of power in the galaxy had shifted completely without the advanced civilizations even realizing what had happened in the regions they had dismissed as irrelevant. Ambassador Zixathera of the Zephyrian Empire stood on the bridge of the Federation flagship Eternal Wisdom and stared in disbelief at the sensor readings that showed human space had expanded far beyond anything the aliens had expected to find. The tall blue diplomat had been part of the original council that voted to abandon humanity over 3 centuries ago, and he remembered dismissing Earth as a primitive world that would probably destroy itself within a few generations. Instead, the sensors showed a thriving civilization that spanned over 60 star systems and included multiple species working together in apparent harmony. Admiral Kretok studied the tactical displays and noted that human ships were using technology that his science officers could not identify or understand. The vessels moved with impossible speed, and their energy signatures indicated power sources that exceeded anything in Federation databases. The Federation expansion into the outer spiral had brought them to the border of what they still thought of as abandoned human territory, and they had expected to find either empty space or the scattered remnants of a failed civilization. Instead, they encountered patrol ships that challenged their right to enter Alliance space and demonstrated capabilities that made Federation vessels look primitive by comparison. Captain Tony Clark commanded the Alliance Border Patrol Squadron that intercepted the Federation scouts, and he transmitted a message that surprised the alien diplomats with its calm confidence. "You are entering Sovereign Alliance territory without permission," Tony announced. "State your business or withdraw immediately." The young human officer showed no fear or deference toward the supposedly superior aliens, and his ships maintained combat formations that indicated serious military readiness. Zixathara decided to handle the situation personally and requested a meeting aboard the human flagship to discuss the new political situation in the region. He expected to find crude accommodations and primitive technology, but instead was transported to a vessel that surpassed anything in his experience. The Alliance warship was clearly alive and organic, but reinforced with materials that his sensors could not analyze. The corridors seemed to pulse with their own heartbeat, and the walls responded to the presence of crew members by adjusting lighting and temperature automatically. Admiral Rebecca Foster greeted the Zephyrian diplomat in a conference room that demonstrated the technological renaissance that had transformed human civilization during their centuries of isolation. Holographic displays showed real-time images from across Alliance territory, and translation systems provided perfect communication between multiple species without the delays that plagued Federation technology. Most impressive were the crew members, themselves who represented 6 different alien races working together with an efficiency that Zixathara had never seen among Federation personnel. "We did not expect to find you here," the Zephyrian admitted while studying the advanced technology that surrounded him. "Our records indicated this region was inhabited only by primitive humans who lacked the emotional maturity for galactic civilization." Rebecca smiled politely and gestured toward the holographic displays that showed bustling Alliance colonies and massive construction projects spanning multiple star systems. Dr. Linda Parker served as the Alliance chief diplomat, and she presented the Federation representative with a summary of human achievements since their abandonment that left the aliens speechless with shock. The rejected species had not only survived, but had created a technological and social renaissance that surpassed anything the supposedly advanced galactic powers had accomplished in the same time period. "Your people were declared unfit for galactic society," Zixathara protested weakly. "The Federation Council determined that humans were too aggressive and emotionally unstable to participate in civilized interstellar relations." Linda's expression hardened as she remembered the pain and isolation that followed the Federation's rejection centuries earlier. "You judged us without understanding us," she replied. "You decided we were not worthy based on your own narrow definitions of civilization, and you abandoned us to struggle alone in the darkness." The human diplomat activated a holographic display that showed the many refugee species that had found sanctuary in Alliance space after being similarly rejected by Federation prejudices. President Sam Morgan appeared via quantum communication link from the Alliance capital on New Earth, and his message to the Federation delegation was broadcast simultaneously across hundreds of worlds. "You taught us that we could not depend on anyone except ourselves," Sam announced. "You forced us to become stronger and more resourceful than we ever imagined possible, and now you want access to what we have built through our own determination and sacrifice." The Federation delegation requested permission to establish diplomatic relations and trade agreements with the Alliance, but their proposals were rejected immediately by the human leadership. "You had your chance to work with us as equals," Rebecca explained. "Instead, you chose to treat us as inferior beings who were not worthy of your time or knowledge, and now you expect us to welcome you back as if nothing happened," Zixathara tried to argue that the Federation had evolved beyond their previous prejudices and was now ready to accept humanity and their alien allies as full members of galactic civilization. But his words rang hollow when confronted with the reality that the Federation had continued to reject refugee species right up until the moment they encountered Alliance territory. The Vorthons and Nexari had been turned away just decades earlier, using the same excuses that had been applied to humans centuries ago. Captain Gary Stevens commanded the Alliance fleet that escorted the Federation ships back to the border, and he made it clear that any attempt to enter Alliance space without permission would be considered an act of aggression. The alien diplomats departed with detailed sensor records of Alliance technology and military capabilities that would shock the Federation leadership when they reviewed the evidence. The reports reached the Federation capital on Zentara Prime and caused panic among the ruling council members, who realized that the species they had dismissed as primitive had somehow developed capabilities that exceeded their own advanced science. Emergency sessions were called to discuss how to respond to this unexpected shift in galactic power, and the debates revealed deep divisions within Federation society about their policies toward other civilizations. Some council members argued for immediate military action to prevent the alliance from becoming a threat to Federation supremacy, while others advocated for diplomatic solutions that might allow them to acquire alliance technology through negotiation. But the most disturbing revelation was that Federation science had stagnated during the centuries of their isolation, while the rejected species had been forced to innovate and adapt to survive. The alliance had proven that cooperation between diverse species was more effective than the Federation's rigid hierarchical system, and their technological achievements demonstrated the value of perspectives that had been dismissed as worthless. The supposedly primitive humans and their outcast allies had become the most advanced civilization in the galaxy, while the Federation had remained frozen in their own arrogance and complacency. The war began when Federation forces attempted to seize Alliance territory by claiming ancient territorial rights that had never been recognized by the refugee civilizations, and Admiral Kelly Brooks received the first reports of alien attacks. On border colonies, while she was reviewing defensive preparations at the military headquarters on New Terra, the Federation had decided that negotiation was pointless, and that force was the only way to obtain the advanced technology they desperately needed to maintain their position as the dominant galactic power. Captain Nick Anderson commanded the First Alliance Task Force to engage Federation warships in open combat, and the results shocked both sides with their decisiveness and brutality. The alien vessels that had once seemed invincible to human eyes were destroyed with ease by weapons that exceeded their defensive capabilities and moved faster than their targeting systems could track. Nick's mixed-species crew worked with precision that stunned their enemies and demonstrated the advantages of cooperation over rigid hierarchy. The Federation had expected their superior numbers to overwhelm the smaller Alliance fleet, but they had not anticipated the technological revolution that had transformed human military capabilities during the centuries of isolation. Alliance. Ships could repair battle damage in real time using Vorthan bioengineering, while their Hydro's temporal manipulation systems allowed them to predict enemy movements and respond before attacks were even launched. Dr. Sarah Peterson coordinated the Alliance intelligence network that had been secretly gathering information about Federation military capabilities for decades, and her reports revealed critical weaknesses in alien defenses that human strategists exploited with devastating effectiveness. The supposedly advanced civilizations had become complacent and predictable, while the refugee species had been forced to develop flexible tactics and innovative solutions to survive against overwhelming odds. The siege of Zentara Prime lasted 6 months and became a demonstration of Alliance military superiority that ended any doubt about the outcome of the war, and General Chris Martinez led the ground assault forces that systematically dismantled Federation defenses with minimal casualties among Alliance troops. The crystalline Nexari provided mathematical analysis of defensive patterns, while granite specialists used their geological knowledge to identify structural weaknesses in alien fortifications. Federation resistance collapsed when their leadership realized that continued fighting would only result in the complete destruction of their civilization, and Ambassador Zix Thara requested a meeting with Alliance representatives to discuss terms for surrender. The proud Zephyrian, who had once dismissed humanity as emotionally immature, now begged for mercy from the species he had condemned to isolation and abandonment centuries earlier. Admiral Emma Davis accepted the Federation's surrender aboard the Alliance flagship Triumph, while representatives from all refugee species witnessed the moment that marked the end of galactic civilization as it had existed for thousands of years. The aliens who had claimed moral and technological superiority were forced to acknowledge that their judgment had been wrong and that the species they had rejected possessed qualities that were more valuable than anything the Federation had achieved. The post-war negotiations were handled by Dr. Paul Johnson, who had been appointed as the Alliance Coordinator for Galactic Reconstruction, and his first task was drafting a new charter that would replace the Federation's exclusionary policies with principles based on cooperation and mutual respect. Unlike the old system that judged species according to arbitrary standards, the new galactic order welcomed any civilization willing to contribute to the common good, regardless of their development level or cultural differences. President Lisa Martinez announced the establishment of the Galactic Alliance during a ceremony attended by representatives from over 100 different species, including many that had been hidden in the outer regions of space to avoid Federation persecution. The new organization was headquartered on New Earth, but governance was distributed among multiple species to prevent any single civilization from dominating the others, as the Federation had done for millennia. The transformation of galactic society proceeded rapidly as former Federation worlds requested admission to the Alliance, and thousands of refugee species emerged from hiding to join the new cooperative civilization that valued diversity over conformity. Captain Brian Foster commanded the first mixed exploration fleets that mapped previously unknown regions of space and discovered civilizations that had been developing in isolation for centuries after being rejected by Federation prejudices. The technological sharing programs established by Dr. Amy Roberts allowed all Alliance members to benefit from the scientific advances that had emerged from cooperation between refugee species, and the results exceeded anything that had been achieved under the old hierarchical system. Medical techniques developed by Vorthon bioengineers were combined with Nexari quantum computers and human engineering to create healing technologies that could repair any injury or cure any disease. The educational exchanges that brought young beings from different species together on Alliance worlds created a generation that thought of diversity as a strength rather than a problem to be solved, and Commander Tony Garcia reported that mixed crews on exploration vessels consistently outperformed single-species teams when faced with unknown challenges. The children who grew up in the new galactic order could not understand why their ancestors had ever thought that differences between species were barriers to cooperation. Former Federation leaders who had embraced Alliance principles were allowed to participate in the new government, but those who continued to advocate for superiority and exclusion were exiled to remote worlds where they could not influence galactic policy. Zix Thera chose to spend his remaining years studying human philosophy and trying to understand how his people had become so blind to the value of cooperation and mutual respect. The final scene of humanity's triumph took place on the rebuilt orbital station above Earth, where Captain Jake Morrison had once watched the Federation ships abandon his species to struggle alone in the darkness. And Admiral Emma Davis stood at the same observation window, looking out at a galaxy that had been transformed by the determination and vision of the supposedly primitive humans and their outcast allies. "They called us too aggressive and emotionally immature," Emma mused to her aide, while watching Alliance ships from dozens of different species working together in perfect harmony. "They said we lacked the wisdom to participate in galactic civilization. But they were wrong about everything that really mattered." The elderly admiral smiled as she remembered the long journey from abandonment to triumph that had taken humanity from the edge of extinction to leadership of the greatest cooperative civilization in galactic history. The species that had been left behind had indeed conquered the stars, but they had done something far more important by proving that strength came from unity rather than superiority, and that the future belonged to those who could work together, despite their differences rather than those who sought to exclude and diminish others.